I'm Nicola Talent and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. So your mother told you not to wear black?
Well, she just commented that all the TikToks and crime worlds I've done, I tend to be in black.
So you have gone for it.
I could have gone worse now, to be honest, but I was afraid of blending right into the background.
I mean, if we didn't have this crime world in the background, I could be your lawyer, because I'm usually in God knows what, but I'm in a kind of a suit. If anyone can see my feet. Clodagh has promised that she will try her best so nobody can see my feet, because I'm quite respectable here up, and then
it's all pyjamas down below, is it?
Absolutely. Only way to be. So we're going to talk Andrew Tate.
Yes, we tried this before.
Yeah.
We did a good discussion, but as we discovered shortly after the video was uploaded to your YouTube channel, the comment section went on fire.
Yeah.
Now, you probably keep a closer eye on it than I do, but I looked at it there the other day and there was something like 150 comments compared to much fewer on much more viewed videos, but just less comments.
Some of them look to me like as if they were nearly... Are they real people?
Well, this is always going to be the debate. I think they are real. I think they believe what they're saying, but I don't think they're right. But it got us thinking, like, had we missed a trick? Like, I mean, the three of us came in. Niall was here that time for the first Andrew Tate debate. And it just it certainly got me wondering, did I jump to conclusions on Andrew Tate? Did I find myself relying on these 15, 20-second sound bites you see on TikTok and Instagram, and maybe I am missing something. So
maybe he is a victim.
Yeah, well, I never once thought that for a second. Well, maybe with the judicial system, if it goes down, he does. Yeah, but
he thinks he is, and his followers think he is, don't they? I mean, that's exactly what they're saying, that he's sort of been picked on because he's telling the truth.
Well, that's true. That is true.
Sort of, the Matrix, is that what the rest of us are?
The Matrix is a big part of this. Yeah, it'll be vindicated in the end, and this will take years. But we kind of discussed, should we do another Andrew Tate debate? But you set me some homework this time. You asked me to sit through his interview with James English. It's 2.5 hours, just short of 2.5 hours, and they kind of dissect what's going on in Romania, who he really is, and what his plans are for the future. And they discuss everything from like religion, politics, social media, his stint in prison. Obviously, women come up, his pals, his followers, his charges, his wealth, his opinions, a whole host of topics. They don't talk about the case for obvious reasons. He doesn't want to prejudice anything that's coming ahead. I don't know if that was necessarily true, but I'm sure his lawyers were saying, look, do these chats, but you just don't talk about the pending trial coming up. So that's pretty much everything was on the table except for that.
I suppose maybe for those who don't know who James English is, what we'll do is just go back to Andrew Tate first of all. And he was on Instagram, he was on TikTok, he was on Twitter. He's returned to that because of Elon Musk, but he basically came out of nowhere, exploded in 2016 when he was kicked off Big Brother. Yes. When a video emerged of him
attacking a woman with a belt,
which he claimed was all made up and it was edited.
Yes.
Partly edited, it wasn't him. And he sort of went on to become an influencer, a bad influencer we could call him, but an influencer anyway. And he's been banned off social media. When he was removed from Instagram, he had 4.7 million followers. And it was their policies on dangerous individuals that they used to take him off. He was taken off YouTube, for breaching hate speech rules. And TikTok barred him for having an account. But videos with the hashtag Andrew Tate have been popping up everywhere.
Of course.
And they've discovered 100 particular accounts that keep pushing him out. And they have 5.7 million followers and have had 1 billion views or something ridiculous like this. Now, James English is a podcaster from Scotland who has a selection of curious characters on his show. I noticed that Katie, what's her name?
Price Hopkins.
Katie Hopkins, somebody who also has been banned from social media, was on recently, and she was describing his show as a protected space
the James English show.
She described the James English. She said it's your protected space. You are keeping everybody back. So in other words, he has a lot of people on who'd be very controversial,
Correct.
who maybe wouldn't be able to be on anywhere else. Her, for example, Tommy Robinson is another person who's featured heavily on the show. And Andrew Tate has done this interview and it's been clipped and it has been watched hundreds of thousands of times. So he's essentially back on YouTube.
Yeah, he is. And one of the things about, just before we get off James English himself, what he also does is he's not just picking and getting access to some of those names that you mentioned, like Katie and Tommy. He what he actually is good at, and I have to hold my hand up, is he gets individuals from slightly, I said marginalised is the wrong word, but
he gets underworld figures on.
Like he gets really heavy hitters from crime. He gets OnlyFans stars, porn stars, these kind of individuals that people are aware of the world in which they operate, but they don't know how it operates and they don't know anything about it or how these individuals got into it. And so what he actually is really good at is deep diving on unknowns and getting some really good sound bites. Again, most of it I'm seeing in short extracts that are pop up on Instagram or TikTok. So he is very good at that. But yeah, you're right. He does he's found himself in this kind of circle that Katie described there, that there's kind of a comfort in knowing that no matter what world you're operating in, if you've been cancelled,
you get on James English.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
he hasn't a background in journalism. He was, of course, the podcaster who flew out to Dubai and did the 3-hour interview with Daniel Kinahan, which was never aired. It was, an ad for it was put out before
the promo,
March of 2022, before the sanctions, the US Treasury came in and sanctioned him. The actual interview was due to go out on St. Patrick's Day as a tribute to Ireland and Daniel Kinahan's homeland. And it never was shown. But he has a particular sort of a way of interviewing people that they go unchallenged during the interview. He allows them tell their story at length. And without really, he does question them, but he allows them tell their story. I think that's kind of his modus operandi and how he goes about it. And he regularly says that himself at the beginning of every interview. He says, we'll go back to the beginning and tell me about yourself. And then they tell him about themselves. And
it's a soft landing kind of approach.
Certainly from an interview style.
Yeah, I mean, someone who is a journalist, and I'm sure you who are a journalist who's moved into podcast world, I'm sure you'd watch these podcasts and go, you're asking the wrong question, or why didn't you pick on that answer? I do think there is a soft approach, definitely. Now, he's getting the sound bites and the clicks and the views. Exactly. And people are willing to get on because they probably know they're not going to get the hard time. And that's something I wanted to talk about later, because one of the points that's made in this podcast is how Andrew was attacked by the BBC interviewer, and it was a hatchet job. They promised me they were going to ask me this, they asked me that. It was a complete attack, but I beat them. I beat them, and MSM knows I've beaten them. Like, that's how he portrays anyone who sits down to talk to him, who actually pulls him up in his comments or his actions. Whereas the likes of the James Englishes and I think Carlson Tucker did one, and the first one, what was his name? The big interview that he did at the very
the American
start.
guy that we saw bits of.
Pet. So he did a big interview with another guy as well.
Who flew out to Romania, I think, just after he was in house arrest after he was released.
Exactly, he went straight in, and James did as well. These are all done at the same table
at the compound.
What is his name? Patrick Best David is the other guy. This is a little clique. Like these aren't just randomers who have requested an interview and got brought in and have done a 3-hour sit down without any sort of forewarning about what's coming up. There's a comfort to it, and he's not being called out on some of the stats. Like some of the stuff I discovered during the first of all, to address the original problem. It wasn't a problem, but the original comment that was made against us in the first time that we didn't know him well enough. And so by sitting down and doing the reading and sitting through this 2.5 hours, I now feel I know way more about Andrew Tate than I did the last time. So I can categorically apologise to no one in that comment section. Like some of the stuff, the absolute turd that comes out of his mouth it's nonsensical, and it's been fawned over by James English. Now, whatever about the subjective stuff and his opinions, and each to their own, people are free speech, kind of all for it, unless there's a hatred element to it. But he he throws out some stats in this podcast that weren't picked up on. Like there's some crazy stuff, and I don't want to go down a COVID denying kind of debate, but there was one bit where he kind of said, James was sort of talking about the lemmings who wore masks and who stayed at home and followed the rules that the government set out. And Andrew pounced on this. He leapt on this conversation because he has strong opinions on it. And he says, yeah, but just look at Sweden. Sweden didn't close their doors or their borders. He kind of put them as this poster boy of COVID and how they let everyone enjoy their lives. And he was talking about him and his brother. And I think he said myself, Tristan, and another person. So there was a third person flew in. We partied all night long in these nightclubs. And Sweden didn't get it wrong. They did it right because they didn't panic. They let their citizens live their lives. And their death rate was one of the best in the world during COVID, they said. Or Andrew said that, and James agreed.
Right.
And they moved on. Now, I decided that was one thing that really bothered me because I know a couple of people who passed away during it. So I actually just looked up the stats because I knew Sweden. And I remember early on, Sweden actually did have a really good start to it. And everyone who was really sick of the restrictions here were looking at Sweden going, why are they sitting in coffee shops and pubs? I remember it. And there were no big, massive surges at the start. So they were kind of a bit of the poster boy at the start. But by the end of it, Sweden's death rates were 2,419 per million, which was nearly 600 more than us per million, 30% more. They were worse than Ireland, and we had a really bad rate. So they were worse than us. They were way worse than their nearest neighbours, Norway and Finland. I have the numbers, I won't bore you. But there's no objective measure stick that places Sweden in a good space when it comes to COVID. But Andrew Tate just lobs this comment out there. Look at what Sweden did. We partied all night long. They handled COVID really well. They didn't. It was an absolute mess there. Millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people died. But James English didn't pick him up on it. They just ran with it. And this kind of random lobbing out of facts, it's kind of Trumpian. Like this idea that whatever I say, if I sound confident, it's going to be accepted. The people aren't going to pick it up on it. And this is why he doesn't have the BBC sitting down with them every day. He keeps talking about BBC as the enemy part of the Matrix, and we'll get to the Matrix. But he talks about all this. He's not been picked up on. He just lobs stuff out. He is definitely more articulate and affable and attractive than Donald Trump. I am not saying he is the same as Donald Trump, but he has the same mode and tone of spreading the message. He'll just lob out a fact. He'll sound confident, and he believes himself that he is telling the truth, and whoever is sitting on the other side of the mic is just fawning and falling for it and not picking him up on it. And I'd say this is happening all over the place with random facts and random stuff that he's just going to lob out there. And as we talked about before, the disenfranchised or the vulnerable or the impressionable, whatever word you want to use, these men in their late teens and 20s, they're falling for it. They're not asking the questions. They're not asking the questions.
Even that thing about Sweden, they're probably repeating it then in conversations.
Of course they are. And it's spreading. It's spreading like a virus, like the coronavirus. So it's this, and I don't want this to be a COVID chat because COVID is only a tiny part of his narrative. But they need to be picked up on these things. And now, if I was sitting opposite the microphone, I mightn't have had those numbers to throw back at him. I'm not an anorak when that comes up. But it didn't take me long to figure out how wrong he was. I had a quick Google and I went to 2 different metrics and I found out which of them was the most accurate. And I was able to disprove this rubbish that he is spouting. It's just... Now, he's kind of had in December of 29th, 2022, he was arrested in Romania along with the brother Tristan on suspicion of human trafficking, rape and forming an organised crime group, right? They remained in custody for 30 days. That was then extended for another 30 and another 30. And they were released at the end of March under house arrest. And that house arrest only ended on August 4th. Correct.
But in the meantime, since the sort of, I suppose, through April, May, June, July, and now into August, while they've been limited with their travel within Bucharest, and that's why people have to come to them and the surrounding areas, he has done this sort of social media onslaught.
Campaign.
It really is. Yeah. And while he's not allowed on TikTok, this hashtag Andrew Tate is allowed. And we've seen that with another pal of ours who we won't mention for the moment. TikTok seems to be easy to, it's closing
manipulate
down.
It slightly.
It's closing somebody down, but they're able to pop up in slightly different or different spellings or something. It seems to me anyway to be very leaky. Twitter banned him in 2017, but Elon Musk has taken over and he's back up and running on that. I saw he'd 4.2 million followers. Had a look at him today. Didn't give him my own follow. I'll just be
just look in every now and again.
I'll just take a stand on my own. But
and he'll notice that.
He will, of course. Anyway, so he's got these platforms, and then like while he's banned from YouTube, he's allowed on this. How do you police that? How does YouTube?
There's different people regulating these social media sites, and so like unless.
And also, there's another one called Rumble.
Yes, he was talking about that a lot.
And he went on that. Rumble seems to be the sort of the alternative YouTube.
The owner of it is his mate, he said in this podcast.
Okay.
And he gave it a massive sales pitch, by the way, towards the end. Like to the point that if I ever set up a YouTube channel, I'm going to be backing it up on Rumble.
Right.
Just for the sake of it, whatever he said, I'm falling for it. I'm one of his lemmings now all of a sudden.
Absolutely.
But it backs up all the videos.
Okay.
So if YouTube do pull you down, all the videos are still there in this background. I don't know if it's darknet. I don't know where it sits, but at least it's maintaining the content that you're creating, which I think is a massive worry for all content creators on YouTube, because once it's shut down or hacked, you could actually potentially lose.
Could they not save their own content?
Look, you're getting into a technical thing here. Where I'm sure he could somewhere.
You're better than I am about that, but. Anyway, he's obviously, if it's his mate running it, Rumble is obviously what it is. It's obviously providing a platform for these people who have been removed for valid reasons.
He won't be taken off Rumble, put it that way.
Now, he recently, in the last week or two, he and his brother, they designed a cell in their home. Did you see this?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so they designed a cell and they went in for 24 hours and went live on whatever it was. They went live on, maybe that was Rumble or something, to show what it was like when they were in jail. So they went to bed, they went to sleep, they had their breakfast.
Did they put cockroaches in?
No,
he keeps talking about
very
the cockroaches.
clean, actually. It looked really nice.
He says you get used to the cockroaches on day 3.
He read the Quran and they did their prayers and all the rest of it. And people, it was on for 24 hours and people watched it, but it was busted. I think the police moved in. I mean, ridiculous. But
well, I mean, look, as a gimmick,
it's a gimmick, isn't it?
It's going to look, and this is what catches the eyeballs. You have to hand it to him, and not everything is complete rubbish. Like he's got some credible characteristics, I have to say. He's obviously a good businessman. He knows how to shout the loudest. Just what he's saying is horrendous. That's my point.
The Romanian DICOT unit, which is in the police, says that it's identified 6 women subjected to acts of physical violence and mental coercion by a group of people, including himself and his brother. And it's claimed that they lured women to Romania under false pretenses of romances and that they tricked them into carrying out pornographic acts, etc. So he is facing a possible trial for that in Romania. So, that remains, he's under investigation for that. His beliefs, we'll go into them so tell me about the 2.5 hours that you suffered of this interview, considering you were asked to do it.
I got there in the end. I had to do it in 3 or 4 different slots, to be honest. The final one was...
Did you have to do it privately, do you mind me asking?
Always. Either in the car on the way into work, or for the final 47 minutes, I told my wife, I said, I'm just going to go for a walk and finish this once and for all. So plugged in the earphones.
So you couldn't subject anyone else in the house to
I wouldn't dare, though. I mean, I've got daughters, so I'd be more concerned if I had sons, to be honest.
Really?
Well, yeah, I think if you do see your son or nephew or little brother engaging with Tate content, your response shouldn't be, that makes sense in our era of anti-masculinity. It should be to reprimand them, discipline them for spending time in a virtual company of a man who has exhibited such extreme contempt for womankind. We can't wait for the culture. Sorry, I had to write this down because I was thinking about it last night. We can't wait for this culture to come to its senses. We must all take action in the here and now, to counter the poisonous influence of these misogynistic false gods that these, with their oppositional ideologies, that they just create this world where they are the gods, they are the one, and everyone else just follows them. You kind of need to nip it in the bud straight away.
So was this bad? This 2.5 hours was really, really bad.
Well, do you know what was worse about it? Because some of the sound bites I've seen before were way worse. Like, and some of his older legacy stuff is worse. And he's held his hand up at some times and to sort of say there was a different time, there was a bit of a context, and he's tried to explain himself out of it. He's not as incendiary as he used to be. Okay, but it was so sycophantic. It was fawning from both of them. It was just 2 lads on bar stools having a chat, and neither of them had really strong views on anything that I or my circles would agree with. And so it was a hard listen, to be honest. Some of it I watched on YouTube just to get a vibe for the context of the table that he talks about in the room and what they were wearing and how they looked. But most of it was listened to through through my phone, and it wasn't enjoyable. That's the straight thing.
The audio would help you concentrate more on what's actually been said, because it does very much. You're watching a video and you're seeing them, and you're probably looking at their, you've got something visual going on as well,
you might
obviously
dilute the message sometimes a little bit, but so I was triggered almost by a few things he said and how he doubles down at times. There's like the religious thing as well. He's now Islam and he's gone from atheist to Islam. It's quite a flip. Again, I hope I'm not stepping the line, but isn't there kind of when you're in, it's kind of like a club or a family, a community, and he kind of mentioned it, and I kind of wonder, did he trip himself up a little bit in this podcast, mentioning the community that has now been created around him in Romania with the Muslim community? I mean, that's
what he's saying.
It's a deeply Christian Catholic country.
But he's claiming
again
that
another
community has been created around him, that the Muslim community of Romania have encircled him. Is that what he's claiming?
Yeah, well, support. He's been getting support from them, and like, again, you can say anything.
But I would say I would doubt that's true. I would think any decent, good Muslim would find him a horror show.
Yeah,
the way he's going on and
there's
trying to latch on to.
There's nothing humble about him, and I would have thought that was one of the important kind of pillars. And like, no one stands up on a pedestal in that religion and tries to kind of garner attention and publicity. He's the exact opposite of that. So yeah, you're right. Probably, I'd say they're probably distancing themselves.
Completely distancing themselves from him, I'm sure, like everybody else.
But it's not going to be picked up on this podcast. Yeah. He says these things. He says, he made, at one point he said, I got a text off a celeb last night, and he was at a party in LA, and like, when I say celeb, I mean A-list, like top of the ranks. And he was with another guy who I would have said top 10 A-list as well. And the two of them just wanted to tell me that they support me. And it was just a text. I'm not going to give you their names because I don't want to get them in trouble, because the Matrix will then attack them like the Matrix has been attacking me. But I just want you to know, James, that I had these texts, random texts.
The Matrix?
I still don't know. I'd love to have the answer for you, Nicola. Jesus Christ. I would love that. I honestly, when I first heard it, I laughed. I thought he was joking, but then I realised now that he actually genuinely does believe it. It's not run by the government. That's like for sure.
Non-magicians, basically. It's like in Harry Potter.
You won't like that comparison, but yeah, it's these influential individuals who are running the world, and they're out to attack him because of his attitudes.
He's going to overpower them, basically.
Well, he says in this he could win an election for anyone if he chose his support. I don't like to politicise my views, but I know that I have the ear of a large portion of the American public, and if I say one way, they'll vote that way. So I know I could win an election.
Like a few years ago, you could have actually laughed at this. This was just some lunatic. But given that the Americans actually voted Trump in,
I kind of. Do you
remember that morning waking up to that news? And
I'll never forget it.
And that and Brexit, it was like, oh my God.
The same year, yeah. I actually weirdly think he possibly could have an influence. Now, whether he plucked someone, if he couldn't just pluck someone out of insignificance and make them president, but I think if he aligned with one of the two leading candidates, I think he probably would have a sway on people. He'll just make people, because he's getting...
Well, again, forgetting that he has this big criminal trial pending. They don't care, but look at
Romania. Trump's support is still as high as ever, and he's got all these... That doesn't affect American voters. So I do kind of believe that he would have an influence on that, and that's kind of scary. He is the most Googled man in the world.
But do social media followers and people watching, I mean, you watched that, I watched that, we're 2 clicks. Like, we're not supporting him.
We're educated and sane, and we apply logic and fact to discussions. And if we do,
is he translating every click, every
you're probably right.
View into a support in his mind.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry. Yes, I get you. Yeah, of course he is. People are watching because it's an absolute hellhole of it, and people are laughing at him. And like, I mean, for all the money and cars, I don't want to sound nasty, but for all the money and cars and businesses he has, he needs to go to diction and elocution lessons. He can't pronounce words. He's all over the place. He sounds like a child at times. The letter T, that's the sound, Andrew, if you're listening. But he absolutely sees this reach, this data that he's getting from his videos. He'll see 10 million views and he'll go, I've got 10 million fans. That's not the case. I mean, we know
that's
this.
Narcissism, though, in its
100%.
ultimate form. He's
Absolutely.
translating that into all those people love me and think I'm correct and everything I said they believe. And it's an incredible arrogance, isn't the word for it? But
yeah, it is. But it's also a complete naivety. And for someone who claims to be as intelligent and bright and entrepreneurial and business focused as he is, he's missing a massive trick there. Like, I mean, those clicks and eyeballs don't equate to support and certainly a positive following. It's a lot of people clicking on to go, what the hell is he going to say next? And
what is occupying his mind? I mean, he's facing this massive problem in Romania with the DCOT unit. You know, they've obviously made moves on him. He has been under house arrest until, I think, actually October. He's still under sort of like Bucharest arrest as such. He can't leave Bucharest until October. So all the while in the background, investigators are working on this case. So, you know, he's not in a great place really, is he? But he's kind of gone ahead with his thoughts and just completely parked and compartmentalized the fact that this criminal trial is pending.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've no doubt it's
on legal advice
dominating his life. Maybe not so much now because he's out, so he can now get on with. He's certainly not flying around the world, but he can do his outside prison jobs, which are running his many businesses. He listed them. I'll find the numbers now in a second. But this will take over. He's not leaving Romania, and he's not leaving Romania. By the way, his slant on it is my loyalty to the country.
Yes,
like everything has a slant in his favour. It's nothing to do with the fact that the judge says you can't leave. No, it's my loyalty to this company. I've got kids with different women. He said, I'm a really good dad. I need to support them. Now the women can't do anything. They literally bring up the kids. That's himself. And actually James English jumped in on that because I think that's his current setup. Is where he says he's given up drinking drugs and I don't have a glass of wine anymore, so I don't want my wife to have a glass of wine either. This kind of thing. So it's kind of controlling, but they kind of justify it because they are making money and providing for them.
And is James English of that mindset?
Yeah, that was his quote. It was like, I don't want my wife to, or I don't think they're married. I don't want my girlfriend to drink and she's at home with the kids and that's her role. I'm going to provide for them. That's his mindset as well.
Okay.
So there's loads of similarities and there was, well, certainly the way they were laughing and joking through some of the slightly sensational comments would suggest that they both share those views. But as you said at the very start, there's this little clique, this little world of people. The Jordan Petersons, Alex Tucker's, Alex Jones, Carson Tucker. They operate in this world and they've convinced themselves that their way is the right way. Like even talking about jail,
adult men, like
and some of them before they went bonkers, were they hiding these opinions and they just didn't have the platform, or like it's scary? But James asked him about jail at one stage and what was it like, and Andrew then said, "Oh well, I wasn't shocked. I knew it was coming." Like it's like he's controlling it. He's like, yeah, and his line was, "I wasn't shocked. It was stage 2. I knew it was coming. 95% hindsight. I made the right move." He says, "I'm better for it. It was a test of mental resolve, and I passed. The worst thing would have been if I was a normal man who had issues outside. I felt good and my life was set up outside." So he didn't have the concerns of wife and kids at home without them. He didn't have that.
Right.
So he pitches jail as a test that he passed, that he was in control of.
And a plan, because he does describe everything as being this plan and part of, I think, the Hustlers University. Oh, yeah. And actually what he has a lot on his Twitter at the moment is all about, you know, there is a plan, and if you follow it, kind of, you can be rich like me. You can have all these fancy cars, and
still
everybody will think you're amazing.
I think that university closed down, though, didn't it? But the Hustler one did.
But the Hustler University is supposed to have closed down, but it is seemingly, there's certainly a lot of mention of it, like in recent days. So again, I'd say some sort of a way it's back up.
Well, now is the time to pounce on those lads who follow him, because they will fork out for this lifestyle.
And when he set up Hustlers University, of course, people were paying $50 a month for his advice or whatever was courses from him. I mean, very similar actually to when you look at sort of the Scientology cult, and you look at maybe even in previous years when Tony Quinn's Educo crew, it's very similar. convincing people that you have the key to success, that you know exactly the path in which they should go, charging them a huge amount of money for the product, which is your advice. And actually, I'm just sort of talking myself into a new yeah, and people, you see, people willingly, and people do buy into it.
And he made millions out of it.
And did he, though, make millions out of it? Because
well, you can question everything he says.
Yes,
no
because
doubt.
I did read that a lot of this money and these companies, and I read this in either The Guardian or the Financial Times or the likes, and it was, they had gone out and investigated his claims of the amount of companies he had and the money and the casinos he owned and everything. And for the casino, they found 3 slot machines in a kind of a rundown, cabin.
You'd see better on Brave Seafront.
Again, I suppose it's like, it was my decision to go to prison. I made the right decision. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if you describe something as... So we have to untangle everything this man says.
Yeah, he does say he claims.
And maybe really we have to teach younger people to try and learn how to untangle what people
question
are saying.
Everything.
Question
genuinely,
everything.
One of the lines he gave us in this was, I have a big life. I live the life of 20 men, children with different mothers, 110 people working for me in 7 companies. I have 15 houses, I have cars, I have planes, and I have boats. I am not happy to get out of prison because the backlog of work was substantial. He is putting this persona.
Now, there were about 16 homes seized from him by the Romanian police, or certainly they're held as proceeds of crime. But he's 110 people working for him.
Yeah, in 7 different companies.
Well, he certainly has a lot of people involved in the setup of what's going on and the filming of what's going on in that place. There's no doubt about it. The stuff is filmed very high production values. The compound he lives in Romania is described as a warehouse on the outside, but when you see the inside,
some of the bits we have seen are
it's fairly plush and impressive. There's money coming from somewhere. Obviously, some of the money did come in from the Hustlers University, and you'd wonder where these companies are, what they're doing.
Again, you'd have
questions asked.
No, not a single thing. Passed off as you lucky ducker.
So
what do we need
to go back to what they talked about women and their own women they are obviously talking about, as opposed to in the past he's spoken about women. He says they should bear responsibility in rape. He preferred 18-year-olds, he said, because he could kind of basically, mould them as such. He preferred to date 18-year-olds and 25-year-olds because they hadn't had many sexual experiences, most of them, and he was going to be their ultimate and only, presumably, sexual experience. He describes to women as the property of men. Did they go down that road or no? So it's tamed a bit.
You're talking about the previous legacy stuff there. That was not quizzed at all. And it won't be, because there's very little comeback to that unless he says, I was wrong, I hold my hand up. But he will never say that. He'll never. The only time he kind of caved on anything, he talked about a kind of a out of context and out of context, and it was a bit of fun or something. He laughed it off. I can't even remember what it was about. But that's as much as he'll ever concede.
But he's now marketing himself, instead of the playboy, he's marketing himself as a father and a provider. So he's kind of, he's gone to the next level as such of how he is portraying himself to the world and to young men.
Which is probably ultimately what the young men want. Mm-hmm. So he's found that the fun playboy thing isn't necessarily going to get him the support or the following, the utter sycophantic way that they just believe everything that he wants to, that he says. By chance he's probably decided, I am now a dad. The playboy thing is restricted heavily because he's under house arrest. So maybe this persona of being the provider is the best I can do. And it will all have been discussed with Tristan. He does have this really good relationship with his brother, I will say, and they seem to be really tight. And he talks about him as this support, this rock for him, as well as someone he can listen to. They've never had a fight, he said. They never once had a fight and all that, which I find hard to believe because they're so antagonistic in their personalities. Although, Tristan is obviously
he's kind of second though. He's
Andrew Light. He's definitely
the sort of the brother of Andrew Tate.
And I think
Andrew Tate's not the brother of Tristan Tate.
Oh, definitely not. No, that'll be his epitaph. Yeah. But together they have formed this persona, and maybe Tristan's happy to be in the shadows. Maybe that's his own personality. He doesn't want to be the front guy. He wants to be the bass player. He doesn't want to be the front man. But he's still getting all the houses and the cars and the planes and the women. And
if they exist.
If they exist, yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen pictures and videos of these parties, and we touched on this in the first pod, where there are these people out there like Dan Bilzerian in America and other people who have this persona that they live this life 24/7. It's more than likely not true that they live this life 24/7. But what we see on social media is attractive to young men, and they want it and they chase it. So at some point, I do believe he was living this life in casinos and cars, whether he was gambling with his own money or not, or whether all of whether the planes and the cars, he owned them or he hired them for the photos. That's another question that happens a lot. So look, you can question everything about this world, to be honest. But he had portrayed a world that is unobtainable, but he has convinced his followers $50 a month.
And I'll show you exactly how to obtain it. Did they talk about depression in the past? He said depression isn't real. I know that James English would be usually quite sympathetic towards people with mental health problems, and in actual fact has spoken quite a lot about it.
Yes, depression came up a few times. The quote I wrote down, I suffered from depression myself, but depression isn't real. I understand very well. Me deciding depression isn't real is how I get over my depression. I can distract myself, but not in jail. So he says outside of jail, he can distract himself from the potential of being depressed.
But he's almost taking that statement as his own depression isn't real.
Yeah.
So he's not actually dictating to everybody with mental health, because he appeared to have done that before.
He kind of, I got the impression that he was saying, look, you can get over depression. It's not real. I think he was saying it to everyone, not just talking about his own personal. Yeah. But again, I mean, we all do it. You use your own personal experience to hammer home your opinion about something. So he says, with one hand, from personal experience, I've been depressed. So I'm allowed to tell you that depression isn't real. Mm-hmm. Like he's almost saying, look, I've been through it with you. I've been through it with myself. You can beat it too, which is like a complete horseshit kind of comment. You don't just come out and say, it's not real. You can think yourself out of depression. But I had it. Like he contradicts himself all the time, and he is casting this big net on people with depression, saying, look, it's not real. Think yourself out of it.
And it's kind of all, again, going back to the key to happiness. He has it. He knows that he understands it, which again, you look at, say, the Church of Scientology, and they don't believe in psychiatric drugs. They don't believe anybody should take. They have their own ways of dealing with with people with mental health, and other sort of cult-like groups the same. So he is sort of evolving perhaps into that sort of leader. Well, he is a leader.
You're probably right. I hadn't gone that far forward in my thinking, but they're like all the kind of hallmarks of a cult are there.
I did a book years ago on Scientology, right?
I remember.
So tiny little bit about it, I know. But there was a couple of things that stood out for me. Those kind of things were one of them. But also they used to sign people up and then get them to do courses to better themselves. They pay a fortune for these courses. And they were obviously always going for the ultimate aim, which was the highest course, which would end up costing you like 750,000 ultimately if you paid for it all, right, to go clear. And that meant that you'd got rid of all these Klingons that are attached to you, and that you'd gone through all these sort of like confessions, really. And while giving the confessions about everything in your past and what you'd done, that was all written down and kept about you on a file. But they also very much, Scientology, the development of it as a kind of a cult church, whatever you'd call it, they saw the power of celebrity, and they latched themselves onto celebrity, and they had a celebrity centre where the kind of celebrities, Scientologists, would go and do their courses, and they'd be much kinder to them, and they would always kind of be very much kind of like courting celebrity.
Making their lives easier and better, and arranging marriages and stuff and everything.
Well, it was certainly kind of like, obviously Tom Cruise was a very sort of high profile, and John Travolta, Scientologists, and they live by that. They believe in the teachings of the Church of Scientology. But the Church of Scientology have these celebrity members that are of a way higher plane than others. And interestingly, organised crime will also court celebrity. It legitimizes you in the world.
Okay,
the way
you've said that before,
even back to when Daniel Kinahan set up his boxing company in Marbella, they courted celebrities. They invited them. They wanted them photographed there. He wanted to be kind of beside them as he went on, and in more recent years with Tyson Fury and all the rest of it. It's all about projecting yourself as this person who's accepted by celebrity, accepted by high-profile members of society, and that opens doors for you.
Did that at the time attract young boxers to join, like to be part of this stable? Like, is that?
But I think probably the money attracts them ultimately, as opposed to whatever. But a lot of people would say, who know him, would say that Kinahan has that almost, that leader, that kind of same sort of status that people like admire him. They hang on his every
charisma though
word.
as well, isn't there?
There's something about him that they do, and he has this status. Everybody else is beneath him. You have to really believe in yourself in a kind of probably a slightly, having a defective personality way.
Oh, absolutely. It's blinkered views on the life. Yeah. Your opinion is the only thing that really matters. And the more people that come with you, the more fun you and they are going to have. You're not willing to.
And yet, we all find them interesting, don't we? I mean, you sort of do find you're intrigued by that personality, not to follow it from my point of view. I wouldn't be following Andrew Tate or following any of these other people, but I do find them intriguing, and I find myself watching them and trying to sort of like work them out. And maybe you're just looking for a chink.
Yeah, I agree. There's kind of a voyeuristic nature to all journalists anyway, and possibly more beyond that. But I want the 15-second sound bites, not the 2.5-hour podcasts. Like I'm happy to watch from afar and let his actual followers give out to me for not understanding the context of the full story. That's fine. I'll be that guy. It's the sound bites are fine from an intriguing perspective, as you say, but the rest of it, no, it's just not for me.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Or for most, really.
Well, I would assume so. But the numbers are incredible. Like the followers and they're not all real, as you know. But like he was when we did the last podcast, the most Googled man in the world. I don't know where he is now in the rankings, but he's up there. I mean, there is an interest. I've mentioned it to several different groups in several different worlds. They all know who he is now. They all have an interest and an opinion. But they know him as this incendiary soundbite, well-built, well-groomed guy who's stuck in a house in Romania. They don't know him as the guy that they want to be. That's not him. He's just this guy on the other side of a screen, and that's where he belongs.
But he's really pushing this narrative in sort of, before, if a trial happens, he's pushing this narrative very much so that he's a victim and that he has been singled out because of his success. And basically, is this what he's kind of saying in it? That basically it's because of his success that he's been targeted, and these kind of allegations are out of jealousy or out of people who have been put up to it.
Yeah, but he represents the viewpoints that don't suit the Matrix, right? This is kind of his, and then I'm like, okay, here we go. I'm listening now. Come on, tell me more, because this is how I'll understand you. And then he doesn't give you anything. There's no substance behind any of his statements. So he refers to the charges and he starts talking about it, and you're kind of getting excited. But then he says, I knew these charges were coming. And he's real brash. He goes, but they had to, because because of the legal ramifications if they didn't. Like, he's kind of saying, if Romania hadn't charged me, think of the trouble they'd be in because of all of the allegations that were made prior to the charges coming.
So he's claiming he's kind of got insiders in Romania.
It's control. But he says, I knew it was coming. Like, because I remember kind of being a bit shocked by that. And maybe it was the way the question was asked, is like, talk to me about the charges and how do you feel about this trial that will probably take up years of his life. And he's straight away confident and boasting, going, well, sure, I knew they were coming. Of course they were coming, because Romania had to charge me, because if they didn't, think of the legal ramifications of it.
Like, do you think he might go over to Romania and cover the trial?
I would love that. Would you? It'll be ongoing for a long time.
I don't know, will it? I mean, it's
I don't know.
I don't know. Efficient in Romania.
I'm not too up on the Romanian judicial system.
I've been over now. I do know that when he was when they both were before the courts previously, all the media were removed. Okay. Completely removed from the courtroom. Now, that might have been some pre-trial, or that might have been, have they been officially charged or not? Not yet. They're sort of still under investigation, because the judicial system over there is different to ours. They have been placed in custody on these sort of charges, but they're not the actual. They haven't actually brought these charges yet against them. They're kind of saying that they will. Because
the headlines in June were that they had been charged, but this is the kind of an interim kind of.
It's a kind of an interim thing. Yeah, exactly. Okay. It's a kind of a charge which they can be held in custody, but there's no absolute clarification that a trial is going ahead yet. I think that will happen in October when this sort of Bucharest arrest runs out, or certainly you get some more information about where they are with it. You see, sometimes like in Spain, for example, they will investigate, the police will investigate somebody, they'll hand the case over to the magistrate, and the magistrate then investigates. So somebody can be in custody without being charged for up to 4 years, unless they have lawyers that can get them bail or whatever. But they can sit in custody sort of like under suspicion as such without actually being charged.
I wasn't aware of that. So maybe that's where it's at the moment. So we'll see in October. What is left of them.
When do Ryanair go?
I'll find out. Of course they do, yeah.
So you'll be getting a Ryanair flight, and I'm sure there's hostels and stuff like that.
Airbnb or something, that's fine, yeah.
And you don't need a photographer, you can just use your phone.
No, definitely.
No expenses.
No.
I know. We'll have a little word and see what they'll give you. See if they'll
put whatever it is,
first class to Bucharest. It'll be well worth going. It'll be fascinating, and he is, no matter what, he is a fascinating character, and this ongoing case in Romania is. So nobody watch the 2.5 hours?
Oh, please don't do it yourselves.
No.
Absolutely not. And anyone who comments on this video will probably have already watched it. So sorry for your loss.
Yeah. All right. Right. Thanks, Daragh Keany.
No problem.